They said he was too broken to stand, but when the final mile came, he carried every single one of them. Staff Sergeant Marcus Ironheart Thompson limped across the finish line of the Wounded Warrior Marathon with 3 exhausted veterans on his shoulders, his prosthetic legs sparking against the asphalt, while crowds witnessed what appeared to be an inspirational moment of teamwork, completely unaware that the man they had dismissed as too broken for active duty had carried wounded soldiers to safety through 15 combat missions in Afghanistan, where his physical courage and mental resilience had earned him 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart during operations so classified that his heroic actions remained sealed in Department of Defense archives. For 14 months, the personnel at Walter Reed Medical Center had treated Thompson like any other wounded veteran who possessed adequate determination but seemed limited by physical disabilities that couldn't be overcome through standard rehabilitation programs. They witnessed his struggles with phantom pain and mobility challenges, observing his quiet frustration during physical therapy sessions and mistaking his methodical approach to recovery for acceptance of permanent limitations that would prevent return to active military service or competitive athletic performance. They saw his careful navigation of medical appointments and assumed he lacked the aggressive warrior mentality necessary for pushing beyond established recovery protocols. Watching his respectful interaction with medical staff and interpreting his professional demeanor as evidence that combat injuries had fundamentally changed his capabilities and competitive drive that once characterized elite military personnel before traumatic battlefield experiences. What they couldn't see beneath his patient exterior and medical chart designations was a classified combat record that included 28 months leading reconnaissance missions for the 75th Ranger Regiment in Afghanistan's most dangerous provinces, where his leadership under fire and physical endurance had enabled successful completion of direct action operations so sensitive that his achievements could only be acknowledged through personnel records accessible to Special Operations Command. Leadership with the highest security clearances. Thompson had voluntarily entered the Wounded Warrior Rehabilitation Program, not because he had accepted defeat, but because his final mission had ended with him carrying 2 wounded Rangers through enemy territory for 6 hours after an IED explosion shattered his left leg, leaving him with combat injuries and classified operational knowledge that made immediate medical treatment necessary for both physical recovery and operational security protocols. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we honor the veterans whose greatest victories often emerge from their darkest moments. Their extraordinary determination concealed beneath medical rehabilitation, while their battle-tested resilience awaits recognition that reveals the unbreakable spirit protecting freedom through physical courage that carried fellow soldiers to safety when survival meant refusing to surrender under the most devastating circumstances. Before we unveil this remarkable story of triumph over adversity that inspired an entire medical facility, tell us in the comments about a time when you witnessed someone overcome impossible odds that completely changed your understanding of human determination and sacrifice. And if you believe that the strongest warriors are often those who carry others when their own strength seems exhausted, hit that subscribe button to support our mission of honoring those whose courage under fire demonstrates that true victory means never leaving a fallen comrade behind. The Wounded Warrior Program at Walter Reed Medical Center operated as the military's premier rehabilitation facility for combat veterans, where soldiers learned adaptive techniques and recovery protocols that enabled successful transition from battlefield injuries to civilian life or continued military service. The facility processed hundreds of wounded warriors annually, while providing comprehensive medical support for service members whose sacrifices had earned them the right to world-class rehabilitation services. Colonel Patricia Healer Rodriguez supervised rehabilitation programs with medical expertise earned through 12 years treating combat casualties. From Iraq and Afghanistan, where her leadership had guided wounded veterans through successful recovery processes that restored functionality and purpose to soldiers whose injuries might have ended their military careers under previous treatment protocols. Thompson, you've been demonstrating exceptional progress during rehabilitation for over 14 months, but your medical profile indicates permanent limitations that would prevent return to active duty or competitive athletic activities. Have you considered transitioning to veteran services positions that would utilize your leadership experience without requiring the physical demands of operational assignments? Thompson continued his physical therapy routine with determination learned from combat zones where mission completion meant survival for entire Ranger teams operating behind enemy lines. His response reflected years of experience with classified operations where fundamental principles of never giving up had enabled tactical success against overwhelming odds and enemy resistance. Colonel, rehabilitation allows me to contribute to wounded warrior recovery while ensuring veterans receive proper medical support during their healing process. These therapy sessions prepare me for whatever challenges come next, and someone needs to demonstrate that physical limitations don't define a soldier's capability to serve and contribute to mission accomplishment. Sergeant First Class David Marathon Williams recently arrived at Walter Reed after losing his right arm to enemy shrapnel and eager to establish credibility within the competitive wounded warrior community. Couldn't understand why someone with Thompson's obvious mobility challenges would maintain such optimistic outlook about future military service or athletic competition. Thompson, I respect your positive attitude, but we need to be realistic about what our injuries mean for our futures. These rehabilitation programs are designed to help us accept new limitations and find alternative ways to serve. Nobody expects us to perform at the same level we maintained before our combat injuries changed everything. Thompson's response demonstrated understanding gained from classified missions where physical limitations had been overcome through mental resilience and tactical adaptation. He knew that Ranger effectiveness required comprehensive preparation that enabled soldiers to accomplish missions regardless of adverse conditions or personal challenges that might compromise operational success. Williams' successful military service depends on adapting to overcome obstacles that would stop ordinary people. Whether you're carrying wounded teammates or completing rehabilitation exercises, your contribution serves military objectives and supports mission accomplishment regardless of physical challenges that might seem insurmountable. The speculation began when Wounded Warrior Program coordinators noticed Thompson's participation in unauthorized training activities that exceeded his prescribed rehabilitation protocols, leading to discussions about his compliance with medical limitations and recovery guidelines that were designed to prevent re-injury during the healing process. Physical therapist Major Susan Recovery Davis, whose medical experience included treating hundreds of combat veterans with similar injuries, organized informal evaluation designed to determine whether Thompson's apparent disregard for medical limitations represented dangerous risk-taking behavior or exceptional recovery that exceeded normal healing expectations for soldiers with comparable combat injuries. Thompson, if you're pushing beyond your prescribed rehabilitation protocols, you could be risking permanent damage that would end any possibility of continued military service. We're concerned about your participation in activities that exceed medical recommendations for someone with your injury profile and recovery timeline. Thompson recognized the concern as legitimate medical caution rather than attempt to limit his recovery potential, understanding that military medical communities developed conservative approaches based on preventing additional injury while maintaining appropriate skepticism about personnel whose recovery exceeded established timelines and medical expectations. The psychological pressure intensified when medical personnel began questioning Thompson's acceptance of his injury limitations and speculating about psychological issues that would explain his refusal to acknowledge the permanent nature of combat disabilities that affected thousands of wounded warriors undergoing similar rehabilitation processes. Rehabilitation counselor Captain Michael Minter Johnson, whose career helping wounded veterans had been built on realistic goal-setting and acceptance of post-combat limitations, joined concerns about Thompson's apparent denial of his medical condition and unrealistic expectations about future military service or competitive athletic performance. I think Thompson might have psychological barriers that prevent him from processing the permanent nature of his combat injuries. He seems to be in denial about what his medical profile means for his future capabilities. We might need to adjust his rehabilitation goals to more realistic expectations that acknowledge his physical limitations. The rumors circulated throughout Walter Reed, with medical staff increasingly treating Thompson as a patient who couldn't accept his new reality and needed additional psychological counseling to process his combat injuries and adapt to permanent disability status that would require significant lifestyle modifications and career adjustments. The revelation that would expose Thompson's extraordinary determination began during the annual Wounded Warrior Marathon, when rehabilitation staff observed the race to evaluate patient progress and recovery milestones. The 26-mile course provided opportunities to assess the effectiveness of rehabilitation programs while celebrating veteran achievements under competitive conditions. Race coordinator Lieutenant Colonel James Endurance Martinez was monitoring the final miles of the marathon when he observed unusual activity among the trailing participants. Noticing that several exhausted runners were being supported by another competitor who appeared to be struggling with his own mobility challenges while maintaining forward progress. The critical moment arrived when Thompson reached mile 24 of the marathon, encountering 3 fellow wounded warriors who had collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration during the most challenging portion of the course. Despite his own physical limitations and prosthetic leg complications, he made the decision to assist his fellow veterans rather than complete his own race. What happened next would be discussed throughout the military medical community for years, as spectators and medical personnel witnessed Thompson physically supporting 3 exhausted veterans while completing the final 2 miles of the marathon, demonstrating physical and mental resilience that exceeded all medical predictions about his recovery potential and competitive capabilities. Staff Sergeant Thompson is carrying 3 other runners while completing the marathon on a prosthetic leg that appears to be malfunctioning. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez reported to medical staff monitoring the race. His performance exceeds all established parameters for someone with his injury profile and demonstrates capabilities that require immediate medical evaluation and service record verification. The silence that followed Lieutenant Colonel Martinez's report lasted several minutes, as medical personnel and spectators processed the realization that Thompson's rehabilitation assignment had concealed combat background and physical resilience that exceeded virtually everyone's expectations about wounded warrior recovery potential and competitive performance capabilities. Major Williams, whose own rehabilitation experience had included interaction with elite military units during joint training exercises, immediately understood the significance of Thompson's performance, while recognizing that such physical and mental toughness indicated extensive combat, training, and operational experience that explained his exceptional recovery progress. That level of physical performance and mental toughness represents the most elite military training and indicates combat experience with special operations units where impossible missions become routine through superior conditioning and mental resilience. Wounded warriors don't develop that capability without proving themselves under the most demanding combat conditions. Thompson realized that his marathon performance had revealed military background that he had been concealing during rehabilitation, understanding that his Ranger qualification represented classified combat operations that would require verification through proper special operations command channels and security protocols that protected operational information. Lieutenant Colonel, my previous military service involved reconnaissance operations for the 75th Ranger Regiment during combat missions in Afghanistan, where physical endurance and mental resilience meant the difference between mission success and losing entire teams behind enemy lines. My rehabilitation focused on returning to that level of operational capability. The investigation that followed began when Lieutenant Colonel Martinez contacted Army Special Operations Command to verify Thompson's military credentials through official channels that maintained records of Ranger personnel and their operational assignments during classified combat deployments and special operations missions. General Patricia Ranger Rodriguez, Walter Reed commanding officer with extensive special operations liaison experience, personally conducted verification of Thompson's military background and discovered classified service record that confirmed his Ranger qualification and combat leadership achievements during missions that remained highly classified due to operational sensitivity. Staff Sergeant Thompson's Ranger qualification is verified and his combat leadership record is exceptional. His service with the 75th Ranger Regiment involved reconnaissance operations during direct action missions that required the highest level of physical conditioning under hostile conditions. His current rehabilitation represents recovery from combat injuries, not acceptance of permanent limitations. The recognition ceremony that followed became a defining moment for entire Walter Reed facility, demonstrating how exceptional wounded warriors often exceeded medical expectations while maintaining capabilities that surpassed normal recovery parameters and could emerge when circumstances required acknowledgement of their continued operational potential. Staff Sergeant Thompson represents the caliber of physical and mental toughness that characterizes America's most elite military operations, General Rodriguez announced during medical center formation. His performance during rehabilitation and the marathon demonstrates that wounded warriors can exceed all limitations while contributing to the recovery and success of their fellow veterans. The advanced rehabilitation program that Thompson agreed to develop became a lasting contribution to military medicine, combining his Ranger experience with recovery expertise to create protocols that prepared wounded warriors for maximum recovery potential rather than accepting minimum disability standards established by conventional medical approaches. His combat background transformed Walter Reed rehabilitation procedures while providing opportunities for wounded warriors to learn recovery techniques from combat-proven Ranger whose experience exceeded conventional medical training and represented the possibility of complete restoration to operational effectiveness despite serious combat injuries. Colonel Rodriguez, recognizing that her assessment of Thompson's recovery potential had been based on incomplete understanding of his Ranger background and combat resilience, approached him with professional respect and appreciation for capabilities that exceeded standard medical expectations for wounded warrior recovery. Staff Sergeant Thompson, I apologize for not recognizing your Ranger qualification and combat background earlier. Your military credentials explain your exceptional recovery progress and physical resilience that exceeded medical predictions, while concealing extraordinary operational capabilities earned through the most demanding military training. Thompson used his recognition to establish advanced rehabilitation programs that combined Ranger training principles with medical recovery, creating opportunities for wounded warriors to achieve maximum recovery potential through specialized protocols that prepared them for return to operational effectiveness rather than acceptance of permanent disability status. The most important lesson from combat recovery, Thompson explained during rehabilitation seminars that became standard throughout Walter Reed, is that physical limitations are temporary obstacles that can be overcome through mental resilience and tactical adaptation. Whether you're carrying wounded teammates or completing marathon races, victory means refusing to surrender when others depend on your strength. The Walter Reed assignment had provided Thompson with opportunity to serve while recovering from combat injuries, demonstrating that exceptional wounded warriors could contribute effectively to veteran rehabilitation while maintaining capabilities that exceeded normal medical expectations and specialized recovery requirements for return to operational status. Years later, when Sergeant Major Thompson returned to active Ranger operations while maintaining his rehabilitation expertise, his story continued inspiring wounded warriors who understood that true military resilience often meant exceeding all limitations while carrying fellow veterans through their darkest challenges. His example reminded everyone that in military medicine, as in all combat support, the strongest warriors often emerge from the most serious injuries, and that sometimes the soldiers who seemed most broken were those whose classified accomplishments had proven that mental toughness could overcome any physical limitation when fellow soldiers needed to be carried to safety. The moment when he carried 3 veterans across the finish line had lasted only minutes, but its impact continued for years, demonstrating that true military excellence often remained hidden until circumstances required warriors to exceed all expectations and carry others when their own strength seemed exhausted, but their determination remained unbreakable. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever witnessed someone overcome impossible physical or mental challenges that completely changed your perspective about human resilience and determination? Have you worked alongside veterans whose hidden strength emerged when others needed to be carried through their most difficult moments? Tell us in the comments about times when someone's true warrior spirit was revealed through extraordinary acts of selflessness that transformed your understanding of what it means to never leave a fallen comrade behind. And if you believe that the strongest soldiers are often those who carry others when their own strength seems exhausted, Hit that subscribe button to support our channel's mission of honoring those whose courage under fire demonstrates that victory means refusing to surrender when fellow warriors depend on your resilience. Nobody calls Thompson too broken anymore, not after seeing him carry 3 veterans across that finish line and understanding that his strength had been proven in combat zones where wounded Rangers survived because someone refused to leave them behind.